Our story today is called The Ugly Duckling. Once upon a time, there was a mother duck, and she was sitting on her eggs, and she was waiting and waiting for those little eggs to hatch, and finally, pop, 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 they started to hatch, and they all hatched except one very big egg. It was bigger than all the other ones. And she wanted to take the babies out and help them but she was afraid to leave this egg. Oh, surely it will hatch soon. She waited, and a few more days, and finally, the big egg hatched. Out came a big, ugly duckling. It was way bigger than her babies, and it was the ugliest thing she had ever seen. Oh, my. Well, can't help that, so she took all the babies down to the pond, and they went swimming in the water and looking for little bugs to eat. And, well, that big guy, he wasn't very pretty, but he could swim very well. In fact, he was the best swimmer of the whole bunch, maybe because he was a little bit bigger. But so they went around, but it wasn't long before all the other ducks in the pond saw him. And they went over to his mama and said, "What is that?" "Well, that's my son. He sure is ugly. Ugh, get him out of here. We don't want him around our children." "Well, he's not very pretty, but he is the sweetest boy." "Well, he sure is ugly." "Well, in time he'll grow out of that, and he won't be so big. He just was in his shell too long or something." But you know what? The other ducklings, other little ducklings, they were smaller than him, but they went and they bit him, and they laughed at him, and they smacked him. The cat came over and smacked him. The chickens pecked at him, the turkey. Everybody told him how ugly and he was, and he didn't belong in their barnyard. Poor mama. She was talking to herself, and she didn't realize the little guy had heard her. I wish he would just go away. Life would be so much easier. And so the little duckling left. He wandered away. And that night it rained, and he was cold, and he was looking around and trying to find a place, and it was just awful. He went through the woods, and he saw an old broken down house, and it didn't look like anybody lived there. No one certainly could live. He peeked inside, and there was a cat in there, and a chicken, an old woman. The chicken looked at him, and the chicken said, "What are you?" I'm a duck." "Can you do anything? Can you lay eggs?" "Don't think so." And the cat over in the corner said, "Well, I can purr. And I can put my back up, and when the old woman rubs me, it makes sparks sometimes. Can you do that?" "No, I don't think so." "Well, what good are you?" And the old lady didn't bother him much, but she just let him sit in the corner. But you know what? The chicken and the cat, they didn't want him there. "Go out, go." You know what? He left early in the morning. He went on. And he traveled, and he came to a big lake, a lago. And there were some geese there. Geese are bigger than ducks, and there were some geese there. And there were some baby geese, called goslings. Said, "What are you?" "I'm a duck." "Boy, you're the ugliest thing we've ever seen, but you can come along with us if we want. There's some geese over there. We're going to go." But all of a sudden, bang, 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 there were hunters. And all the geese started falling out of the sky, and the water was filling with blood. And here came a dog to get the geese, swimming out in the water. And he came right up to that little guy. And he was so scared, he put his head under the water. But the dog went right by him. The little duckling was so scared he could hardly breathe. But for the first time in his life, he was glad he was ugly, because he was so ugly that the dog didn't even want him. But he went and he found some bushes to hide in, and he just lay there all the rest of the day so nobody could find him. The dogs couldn't find him, the hunters couldn't find him. And then he moved on. And it started to get cold. And a lot of the birds would come and go, and they didn't pay him any attention because he was so ugly. And one day he saw some of the most beautiful white birds he could ever imagine. They were big and white and graceful. Wow. And he just looked at them. He couldn't imagine any bird being prettier. But it was getting cold, and they finished eating and they flew off. And he never saw them again. But he stayed there at that little lake because nobody bothered him, and he could just be by himself. And as long as cats weren't biting him, and ducks weren't biting him, and turkeys weren't biting him and scratching him and making all sorts of nasty, he didn't mind being alone. Well, it got colder and colder, and the little lake got smaller and smaller because it was freezing over. There was only a little patch of water, and then one day it froze too, and the little duck froze inside of it. He woke up in the morning and he was stuck, and he didn't know what to do. He thought, I'm just going to die here. But a poor old man came and found him, and he took his shoe and banged the ice so that he could get out. And he took him and he put him inside his jacket, and he took him home with him. And showed his children. They thought he was oh so much fun. He was just the funniest thing. But they were so noisy and they scared him. And he knocked over the pail of milk, and he fell in the butter, and the man's wife was so angry, and she took off her shoe and she threw it at him. She said, "Get out of my house." And there he was off again. Nobody wanted him. He was too ugly. Off he went into the woods again to find some place to sit out the winter where it wasn't so cold, but it was so cold. But finally, the weather started to warm up. And he didn't like this place, so by now he was getting bigger and his wings were stronger, so he started to fly. And he flew and he found some other water. Down into the water he went, and he was finding some bugs in there to eat, and into the water flew 3 white birds. He recognized them. They were the ones that he had seen a long time ago, those beautiful birds that more beautiful than he could ever imagine. And as they came down, right in front of him, and he was so ashamed because they were so beautiful, and he was so ugly. And he put his head down into the water. But when he brought his head up again, he saw something that he had never noticed before. He saw his reflection in the water, just like a mirror. And he looked in there and he saw not an ugly little duckling, but a beautiful white bird. He looked just like those birds that had come to join him. And they looked at him and said, "Oh, you are so handsome, so young." And the bird said, he put his head up, and he was kind of embarrassed. He put his head underneath his wing. He said, "No, you are." And then he put his head up and looked, and there were some children. There were some children out there who had come to see those other birds. And you know what those birds were? They were swans. Do you know what a sea snail is? Sea snails. They were swans. And they said, "Poppy, Poppy, look. Look, there's a new swan. There's 4 now, Poppy. And Poppy, he is more beautiful than the other 3. Look how young and beautiful he is, Poppy." And they took some bread and they threw it out to the water. Oh my. And that young bird, he looked around. And he realized he wasn't a duck. He wasn't a duck. He didn't fit in because his mama put his egg in the wrong place. He wasn't a duck. He was a swan, and that's why he was so much bigger. That's why he looked different. You know what? He wasn't sad anymore. But you know what else? He was thankful. He was very thankful because after being the ugly one for so long, he realized, if I hadn't been so ugly, I wouldn't have appreciated how beautiful I am. And I might have been proud. But he wasn't. No, for so long, he had been laughed at and made fun of and been beaten, but not anymore. And he didn't get proud. No, he was just thankful that he had been created as a swan, and now he was all grown up. See, sometimes people are different from us, and we might think, "Ew, look at that." And they're just different. Some children have trouble learning. Some children can't see. Some children look funny. But that doesn't mean they don't have a sweet heart. What you are outside is not important. The kind of person you are inside is what's important. Are you kind? Are you kind to others? Are you helpful? So when other people laugh at you and say, "Oh, look at him," what do you have to remember? God made you. God made you the way you are. And right now things might not be happy, but God has a plan. And God has a reason for every part of you. Everything about you the way it is, God has a reason. Some children are born with no arms or no legs. Some children are born they cannot see or hear. Their faces, you think, "Ooh, that's a mistake." No. God made them that way for a reason. And sometimes those children that are all seem like a mistake, they become a child of God, and you know what they say? "I am so happy for the way God made me." Nobody else can understand it, but I do. And God made me this way for a reason, so that I can praise Him. However you are, you need to be thankful to God. And when you see others that are different from you, don't point, say, "Ew, what's it?" That's not good manners. No, you just be their friend, right? You be their friend and show them God's love.